You know, Gaston Glock recently passed away in December of 2023, and today I want to honor him by not only talking about the brand and the pistols that we all know, but the things that led up to the creation of the Glock brand, and honestly, what he had to do to kind of keep it at the forefront of law enforcement, self-defense, and the civilian market at the same time. It is a pretty wild ride, and I hope that you guys will enjoy this one. Now, those of you that are familiar with my channel know that Glock is not my favorite handgun on the planet, but one thing you've never heard me say is that I don't respect these guys for what they've done for self-defense and concealed carry. Every other manufacturer has followed suit with their own striker-fired polymer frame pistol, and Glock is a huge reason for that. And hey, while I think there's some companies that are out there doing this better now, that still doesn't take away from the fact that I do have a lot of respect for the company. Now, if you like what I do, consider subscribing. You could also join us on Patreon or join the channel right here and gain access to some pretty cool perks. Literally, the perks start at $1, $2 a month. It's not a whole lot, but it definitely helps. And one more thing, if you haven't checked out the new merch that I recently designed and dropped, I think it is the best lineup yet. And we actually got Ruger involved in this one as well. Not the company, but my dog. So you'll see. Check it out. I'll make sure to leave a card down to it, either down at the bottom or up at the top of the video. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, Gaston Glock, he was born in Austria, and I'm not going to go back throughout his whole childhood and all that kind of stuff, but bringing us up to World War II, he actually served in the Wehrmacht in World War II. This was near the end, but he still had military service with the German army, with the Wehrmacht, at the end of World War II, which is pretty insane. And you know, he was notoriously kind of dodgy when it came to his World War II service, and, you know, rightfully so. Born in Austria, of course, he was surrounded by this throughout his entire childhood. He was born in 1929. So at that point, you know, every man, woman, child, you know, they were indoctrinated, right? And so, you know, knowing that they're on the wrong side of history, I can't imagine that's something that he wants to sit there and brag about, you know, that he's a World War II veteran. He was just a teenager, and at the same time, those guys were indoctrinated. So it's something he really didn't talk about a whole lot, and I don't even know that we have a whole lot of information on it, besides the fact that he served. But it wasn't until the 1980s when Glock released his first pistol. Now, at this point, he's 52 years old, and this is his 17th patent. So it has nothing to do with the fact that the Glock 17 holds 17 rounds. It was literally just, that's the number of patents that we fell on with his first pistol. Now, he actually had experience with polymers in the past, from, you know, knife handles and the sheaths to go in them. And he also actually had some camera people that were some of his first employees that also had experience with polymers. And so when he got this injection molding kit for making that stuff, he was able to create his first design, the Glock 17, with, of course, that polymer lower that we all know, and something that was able to keep the weight down. Not only that, the capacity up compared to other pistols at the time. Now, this was an interesting time for Gaston Glock. So his whole approach to this is, let's sell the pistols as cheaply as we can to law enforcement. Because when law enforcement starts using them, that's going to give them validity, especially in the civilian market, which is where he can make up most of his money lost by obviously undercutting himself selling to law enforcement. And that's exactly what he did, and that's why they became super popular very quickly. Their whole business strategy worked to a T. And considering how much of the law enforcement market still has Glock pistols that are standard issue to this day, just goes to show you the kind of brilliance that went behind their marketing strategy. Now, another thing that helped their popularity is the hype created by the media around this gun when it first came out. There was literally news reports on this thing talking about, you know, this plastic gun, you're going to be able to get it through airport security and nobody's ever going to know. I mean, there was like mass hysteria created by the media with this gun. And guess what that did for Gaston Glock and the reputation? It actually increased it and made it better. Now, of course, we all know, you know, 84% of this gun is metal, right? And obviously, the slide, all of the major components have to be metal, but even in the magazines themselves, they're all steel reinforced, and you have steel all throughout this gun. So it is hilarious that people would think, and this is just people kind of jumping to the gun. They hear that, oh, polymer, plastic, lower, man, this gun, it must be, you're going to be able to get this thing through anywhere. But that obviously was not the case. It did more to help Glock, though, than to hurt them. Another thing that pushed this gun to the forefront is not only law enforcement, but also movies. Die Hard 2, Bruce Willis, the Glock 7, which I don't think anybody really knows still to this day whether the production team made a mistake and meant to say 17 or they just said Glock 7. But whatever the case was, from movies to video games to rappers, even Dr. Dre and Tupac, they even promoted them in the 90s. And so also it's a part of our culture, right? No matter if that's good and bad, it's still there. Now, do we blame the company and Glock for making such an awesome pistol? Absolutely not. We blame the people, the perpetrators that do these things, and that includes gangs and everybody else. So it's a really interesting dynamic, from law enforcement to the GSSF to concealed carriers, self-defense, rappers, and then the other side of it, right? The criminal world as well. This is the most popular handgun, and there's a reason for it. Not only are they fairly inexpensive, $500 to $600, but also the reliability. Okay, the magazine options, they're just so universal. A lot of companies, when they make PCCs, they make sure that their Glock mags are compatible with their gun, because that's going to be the most popular layout. So anyways, it's been intertwined in pop culture, in movies, in video games, in music, and has really solidified it in a way as being America's new handgun of the late 20th century. Of course, the early 20th century, the 1911, dominated that. But at the same time, this gun has dominated from, let's just say the 90s on, when it comes to not only being in a lot of concealed carriers, holsters, law enforcement, and all that, but just kind of being a staple in America. Now, it is interesting when you look at Glock and law enforcement, because they're pretty much synonymous with each other. And of course, there are departments that carry SIGs and Smith & Wessons and others, I'm sure. But again, Glock owns the majority of law enforcement market. Law enforcement kind of turned on them in the 90s with the assault weapons ban. So Gaston Glock kind of seen this thing coming. So for 7 days a week, and I think they had 3 shifts going on, they were making guns and the magazines to go with them. Once the assault weapons ban came up, now Glock is basically sitting on a gold mine, because now with the magazine restrictions being 10, and they have a bunch of magazines, that are ranging from, 15 to 17 rounds, maybe even more at the time, they have themselves a gold mine. So essentially what they're doing is they're telling law enforcement, hey, why don't you trade in your guns for the newly redesigned Glocks, and then they basically would get these police trade-ins and then sell those off. Well, the police departments came back after being scrutinized about all of these guns on the streets, and they basically said, hey, this is Glock's issue. They were buying all these guns back from us. And so the law enforcement agencies, and I don't know exactly which ones, I wasn't able to confirm which ones, we just know the law enforcement agencies were actually blaming Glock for crimes that were happening that happened to involve guns, because of what Glock was doing to kind of protect their business. And actually, some municipalities took it so far as to sue Glock for flooding the streets with guns. Well, Glock bounced back and said, who are you accusing of putting guns on the streets? We've done business with the very business that is suing us. It's actually your guns on the streets. And honestly, I couldn't find much information about this lawsuit, afterwards. But I do know that it was dropped at some point. And of course, Glock was pretty well known for suing other companies as well, even if they didn't make firearms. You may know about them suing Smith & Wesson for basically using the same design, and it's very, very similar to the Glock, talking about the old Sigma series or SD series. But then they would sue airsoft companies. You know, in the year 2000 alone, they sent out 5 different trademark infringement letters, either threatening to sue or telling the companies basically cease and desist. So they were very well known for protecting their patent and letting other companies know that even if you made an airsoft that looked like a Glock or anything like that, I've even heard, and I don't know this is true, but I've even heard they've taken down video reviews of Glock copies. Again, I don't know. I saw that and it just kind of, I was like, oh, holy crap, you know. But yeah, they're very serious about their trademark, and any kind of infringement upon that, uh, seemingly they are quick to sue. Now this is over the course from, you know, the, let's just say the early 90s to now, but they've been involved in quite a number of lawsuits themselves. Now, Glock actually could have taken over the contract, you know, in the mid 80s whenever the US Army was trying to replace the 1911. But they couldn't come up with the 35 test guns in time in order to do that. And of course, Beretta ended up winning that contract. And while it would have been huge for Glock, it eventually wasn't needed, because another thing that they started was the GSSF, which, you know, basically was their way to introduce new shooters into the sport using Glocks and putting up some serious money in some of these competitions. And the GSSF is around to this day. Again, just trying to, you know, anything they could do to put Glock to the forefront, whether that was free press from the media hysteria around plastic guns, or from pop culture, or creating their own GSSF in any other way they could, even with law enforcement. That's another way that they became the most successful gun company essentially in the world, especially in the United States though. But it wasn't all peachy for Gaston Glock. Even though he did a lot of incredible things, he was notoriously secretive, but there was a couple of incidents that brought him to the forefront. Notably in 1999, Charles Ewert, I think I'm saying that right, was one of his longtime business partners. Well, Gaston Glock actually accused Ewert of embezzling funds. Well, Ewert got pissed and he hired a French mercenary to unalive Gaston Glock. Now, this attempt on Glock's life actually failed because Glock was able to fight back. Also in 2014, I believe, I'll make sure I leave it up here just in case I got the year wrong, but after 50 years of marriage, Gaston Glock and his wife actually divorced. That's a long time to be married. Well, through this divorce, she actually sued Glock for racketeering, and so eventually the lawsuit went away a few years later. But still, it's a couple of incidences there that brought, you know, the otherwise pretty recluse Glock to the forefront of some controversy. And the last thing that we'll talk about is Glock actually didn't shoot a whole lot up until his first prototypes, and then the prototypes afterwards. He would actually shoot those, but he would do it left-handed even though he was right-handed. And the whole idea was that, hey, if this thing blows up in my hand, at least I can keep my dominant hand so he could continue to be an engineer and do his work. Pretty incredible life, man. So, you know, he's born in 1929, passed away in 2023 in Austria as well. And just a pretty crazy journey that this guy took in order to make the biggest gun manufacturer in the world. And so, again, I'll just kind of state that even though I like pistols, striker fire pistols, I like other manufacturers more. I just find them more comfortable. I find that I shoot them better. I like the features on them better. There's no denying that the Glock 17 and Glock in general answered the call for law enforcement when it was desperately needed at a time where there were 6-round guns essentially, and you know, any other guns were super heavy or awkward. They came in at the perfect time. Self-defense, the concealed carry world, and a lot of gun owners right here in America can actually thank the Glock pistol for saving their lives. And so while it is used on the other side of things as well, that's the way everything is, right? Unfortunately, it's not only good guys that have access to these, but more good guys with more access to guns like Glocks and others is definitely beneficial to us all. And so this is definitely a company that I respect, even though I've gone off a limb and I've talked about them before in the past, and I still stand by a lot of the stuff that I've said about them. I definitely respect what they've done and the man behind the company. So that's it, man. I'd love to hear your opinion on Glock or some of these facts that you actually thought were interesting. If you like this type of content, make sure you let me know by liking the video, sharing it, and subscribing if you haven't already. And again, if you like what I do and you want to support us further, you could do that on Patreon or join the community right here and never have to leave YouTube. And one more time, I got to mention the merch, and I will actually get some of that stuff in because I want to try it for myself because, like I said, I really am digging the new designs that I was able to come up with. You can check all that stuff out in the description box as well. Made it super easy for y'all. Either way, I appreciate your support. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.